episode of the Liberator Podcast. We are all back in the studio today. Haven't been here for a very long time. All December was done. We didn't come in at all for that. So
it was a hiatus.
It's good to be back.
Justified.
Welcome back. It was a hiatus, yeah.
Yeah, welcome back. I was here. I don't know about you guys. Going off, getting married, seeing family.
Yeah. Away.
Have your entire families moved to Oklahoma, okay?
I'll try.
Hard sell.
We'll see.
Yeah.
James is probably closer than my family.
Well, my in-laws. My mom actually, growing up, my mom would actually tell me, be careful where you apply to school and work because you don't want to end up somewhere like Oklahoma. And it was always Oklahoma. It was never Missouri or Arkansas. It was always Oklahoma in particular.
Yep.
And she helped me actually move from Ohio to Oklahoma. And she was like, oh, it's actually not bad. It's actually grass and trees.
And teepees, right? You know, whatever she thought. Yeah, and Walmarts.
Yeah.
So
it's good to be back. First episode of the new year. And first episode dealing with kind of the first congressional session post-Roe. And post-Roe, you might think, there's no Roe versus Wade in the way. The pro-life establishment really does want to end abortion as quickly as possible and abolish it. Maybe that will be one of their recommendations. But they have given 6, a number of pro-life groups, a few dozen, kind of all the heavy hitters, Students for Life, Students for Life Action, March for Life Action, Heritage Foundation, Americans United for Life, all those groups submitted 6 recommendations to Congress, none of which include the abolition of abortion, not even the Life at Conception Act, which is something that doesn't have equal protection, but at least it's life at conception. They didn't even ask for that.
yeah, big shocker.
Yeah. So
Roe v. Wade is repealed. Pro-lifers get their big goal, and they're apparently able to do anything that they want to in regard to abortion, and they're like, well, let's regulate it and recommend all the things we've always been recommending before.
yeah.
Can we draw this thing out even more?
Yeah, you were mentioning it
Gross.
earlier. There's probably little difference between this list of bills and a list that they may have written prior to Roe being over.
Yeah, I mean, this a lot of this could be 10 years ago. Now I think they're getting more confidence in now we will unify behind the heartbeat bill,
Right.
which before some of these pro-lifers wouldn't even get on board with the iniquitous heartbeat bill. But all of this, there's nothing in here that hasn't been called upon Congress by pro-lifers for years and years and years and years. Right. So we're going to list them, and then we're going to go through them. Right. The recommendations, and you can actually look this up if you want to read their actual letter.
Yes.
Just search the Heritage Foundation
pro-life letter to Congress.
Yeah, and it's just a couple of pages long, and then it has all the signatures of all the different people.
And real briefly, before we actually even get to the bills that they are recommending as part of their pro-life agenda for the 118th Congress, the worst part about this letter is that they are basically holding up as good the worst part of Dobbs. Now, there was a lot of issues that Dobbs had, and go back and listen to episode 100 of the Liberator Podcast, where we talked about the Dobbs decision. But the worst part about Dobbs was that Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote a concurrence in Dobbs, which is basically, I agree with the majority, but I differ slightly in my reasoning, or I want to highlight my reasoning. And Brett Kavanaugh's big thing is the Constitution does not prohibit abortion. The Constitution is neutral. There's no mention of abortion. There's no mention of preborn children. And so abortion is the prerogative completely of states or Congress to do whatever they want to do with. Yep. Now, of course, that's untrue. The fact that equal protection is guaranteed to all persons, that every state is prohibited from denying persons the equal protection of the law, includes preborn children. And so the Constitution does prohibit abortion. But Brett Kavanaugh says the people and their elected representatives, the Constitution leaves the abortion question to the people and their elected representatives to resolve through the democratic process in states or Congress. Now, this is actually strange because I've seen Heritage Foundation authors write about how the 14th Amendment should protect preborn children.
Right.
And yet here in their demands to Congress, or in their agenda for Congress, they're highlighting, no, the 14th Amendment does not include preborn children. Here's Brett Kavanaugh saying that this is completely the role of the legislature and nothing to do with the courts.
Yeah, Brett Kavanaugh's exact position is opposite the position that they've held at earlier times. And people need to understand that the Supreme Court could have ruled Roe is unconstitutional, should have never been constitutional. We're repealing that. Furthermore, the Constitution, like as the Supreme Court's job is supposed to be interpreting the Constitution, they could have said, furthermore, the Constitution actually seems to say that no state is allowed to legalize the murder of any human beings because that's what was meant in the 14th Amendment. They didn't do that. The reason they didn't do that, and it's so important for you to understand, is that there was a majority of pro-lifers on the Supreme Court. If there were a majority of abolitionists on the Supreme Court, and there may only be like almost one, but if there were a majority of abolitionists, they would have said, Roe's repealed, and no state has the right to practice abortion in the United States of America. So that would be like what was in the amicus brief that Foundation for Abolishing Abortion filed and so many other groups signed. And so that amicus brief was only upheld in one part, but did not gain traction with them in the other parts, the greater parts.
Right. And it's important to note here that what we are prescribing that the court should have done is not a stretch, right? When the Constitution says that every person shall get the equal protection of the law, the person who's stretching is the person who says, oh yeah, but clearly, a preborn child is not a person. Like that person who's making that claim, which Brett Kavanaugh is, he's saying the preborn child is not a person. They're sub-person. They're human non-persons. That's an indefensible position. That's ridiculous. That's absurd.
And it's not the position that anyone held back when the 14th Amendment was written. That's a subsequent readjustment. It's like the invention of the idea that you can have humans who don't yet have personhood comes later. When they write the 14th Amendment, he just uses the word person in there as like a used colloquial, synonym of human. But he's not meaning like humans that meet personhood. He's actually clearly not meaning that because it's being written to basically say that slaves who have been seen as human but not fully citizens or fully persons, slaves have these rights. So it's a flipping and it's the opposite of what the 14th Amendment should be interpreted as saying.
Right.
So we should move on to the recommendations. The way we're going to do this is we're going to look at we'll list all 6 recommendations they do, and then we'll go through each one of them and why they're silly recommendations, and then we will, of course, advocate the one thing that they should be recommending, which is total and immediate abolition in every state. So, the 6. Who wants to read the 6?
I'll read it.
Awesome.
So they list heartbeat bills, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, the Down Syndrome abortion ban, a bill to prevent abortion pills being marketed and sold in pharmacies, Save Moms and Babies Act, 3 bills to prevent taxpayer funds from going to abortion, Conscience Protection Act to prevent medical professionals from being coerced into performing abortions.
So again,
no abolition.
No abolition. These are all things that were being pressed both at the state level and in Congress prior to Roe. And so let's kind of go through each one.
There might be you might be saying like, well, but those are good things, right? Like, aren't those good things?
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, interestingly, these are all things that we were told we have to do these things because we can't do abolition or we can't do total bans because the Supreme Court's in the way. Now that the Supreme Court's not in the way, this is still what they're asking for. So
like specifically Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. We can't do anything about abortion, but maybe we can pass an act to protect babies who survive abortion because that's not in violation of Roe. Well, now you don't have Roe and you're still pushing that. It's like literally the worst and dumbest thing that pro-lifers do that a bunch of unthinking people get behind. It's like, what? But no change.
So we're a bit out of order there, but we can start with that one because this one, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, actually got a vote in Congress. I forget if it was today or if it was yesterday, but it passed with every Republican supporting it and one Democrat from Texas voting in favor of that bill as well. Every other Democrat voted against it.
Which we always harp on the Republicans, but the Democrats, they won't even protect babies that survive abortions. They're brutally pro-abort. So
this bill is kind of unique in that it really exposes both sides. It exposes the Democrats, how, and this is the purpose that Republicans run this bill. It exposes how extreme they are. That even the child outside the womb who you just tried to chemically poison and it didn't work and they survived and now they're on the table and you don't have to treat them as a human being and give them medical care.
You meant to abort them, you should be able to go through with it.
Right.
Bill.
But then from the other side, on the Republican side, that's all this bill, the only purpose it serves is to try to get Democrats to admit that, because the actual function of this bill is to incentivize and teach abortionists, you better get it right the first time.
Yep.
That's all it does.
And it's not like it's legal already. If the baby survives it, it's illegal to kill a newborn.
Right.
So it's a completely pointless bill.
Yeah, and I think George Bush actually signed a version of this bill. George Bush also signed the Partial Birth Abortion Act. And so, yeah, you're right.
Not even.
There's different versions of this bill that are already in law, already supposedly in effect.
Yeah,
but
you can't kill a baby that's even partially out of the womb.
Right.
You got to kill them first. So, yeah, I think that Get It Right the First Time Act, and that's what regulation bills do. They tell abortionists to do their jobs better.
Yep. Yeah, this bill, it's the Get It Right the First Time Act. It's the kind of partisan game show act. It's there's no substance here. There's nothing real. And it's interesting. There's actually a guy, an SBC guy on Twitter, who was saying like, "Oh, this bill proves why I'm not an abolitionist, because the abolitionists wouldn't have gotten behind this bill and they would have joined the Democrats in not supporting it." It's like, this is the stupidest bill ever. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't prove anything.
Well, it proves that guy who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yes, there you go.
It is helpful in that when something like this comes along, it kind of separates wheat from the worst chaff.
Yeah.
And it sanitizes the whole thing. It's like, oh, well, none of them are born alive. All the babies die in the womb. And it just is a way of trimming the abortion tree and making it a whole lot.
Yeah. Seething some consciences, maybe. Like they don't, killing a baby outside of the womb or inside of the womb, like in a mere differences of seconds, is just, this shouldn't be hard for anyone to understand. But we should point out, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, that sort of thing, is what they passed instead of an abolition bill. So they have an abolition bill like in Texas. Jeff Leach is like, no, we're not voting on that. Right. We'll vote on this. Everyone, does whatever. We did this. Yay. It's a substitute. So that's one of the reasons that they put this forward. Again, it should have been number one on the list. We recommend that Congress abolish abortion, but it wasn't. So let's go back. There's not much. We don't need to say anything else about that nonsense. But the first thing was the heartbeat bill.
Heartbeat bill was their first recommendation, and this is one regular viewers of our show will have no opposition on the heartbeat bill and will have heard us talk about this before. But yeah, just real quick again, let's go through a couple of different verses here. Unequal weights and measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord, Proverbs 20:10. And woe to those who enact evil statutes and to those who constantly record unjust decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor of my people of their rights. Isaiah 1:1 and 2.
Clear, and that's what the heartbeat bill does.
Exactly.
It shows preference to human beings after a certain period when they possess a beating heart. And just theologically and ontologically, just so you understand, the possession of a beating heart is not what makes you valuable. All mammals have those. What makes you valuable is the possession of the image of God, which is there from the moment of fertilization and true conception. So you're a human being. That's why you should be protected from murder. That's why no one has the right to murder you. It has nothing to do with a beating heart. And so these kind of bills are not just bad in that they're iniquitous, things that God hates and all that kind of stuff, and they delay abolition and all the things we always talk about. It's also bad in that it's training and teaching the culture to believe that possession of a heartbeat is what is important.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah, it plays right into the worldview of the culture. The attributes about a human being are what make them valuable.
Yeah.
That's what the culture is trying to do.
Yeah.
And the pro-lifer who puts forward the heartbeat bill, one of the most common defenses I hear from pro-lifers about the heartbeat bill is that they say, well, we're training people, about the heartbeat, about when there's a heartbeat and all this stuff. And it's like, then you're playing into their hands.
Yeah,
you're teaching them.
Yeah.
You're teaching them to look for a heartbeat or to look for a cute nose or to look for some attribute about a human and think that's a valuable person because of that trait. But that's the whole worldview we're trying to destroy, and you're playing right into it and you're strengthening it.
Yep.
And we have to play according to our worldview, or we can never expect our worldview to gain any ground in this culture of death.
And it's also diagnosing it as a scientific problem. Like if they only knew scientifically the heartbeat's here or the heart or whatever,
right.
The organs have developed but it's not a scientific problem. People know it's murdering a human being, and if you diagnose it that way, you're always going to be wrong.
Yep.
It's a theological problem.
Yeah, people are. I know it's stopping a heartbeat. That's the point. I don't want that heart to continue to beat, the thing to grow, and me have to put it in diapers and pay for its food and all that. So it's a sin issue. You're not dealing with it that way. And then the last thing maybe to say about the heartbeat bill is hundreds of thousands of abortions happened before that period anyway. And whenever you have a heartbeat bill in place, it's almost just saying, hey, culture, do this more quickly. Like some will say, oh, but it's like really close. Like when you know that you're pregnant. Well, it's like, this is why people order abortion pills and Plan B pills and stockpile that sort of stuff and just take them because they're worried, oh man, if I let it go too far, I might not be able to have an abortion in my state, or I might have to drive 2 hours to Wichita. So it just tells people when to kill their children.
Yeah. Well, next one is the Down syndrome abortion ban. This one's always kind of interesting to me. I know Down syndrome babies are like disproportionately targeted for abortion or whatever, but it's actually discriminatory against non-Down syndrome babies.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I wish I had Down syndrome. That way they wouldn't kill me in the womb type thing.
Yeah, reverse discrimination.
Yeah, it is. It's not funny. It's just kind of sick that a lot of these laws.
The incapacity for thought is funny, but the thing I always think is like someone passes a Down syndrome ban, and then in that state they go or in the United States or whatever, they go to the ultrasound and 20-week ultrasound. And they're like, well, your baby's got all the markers, the Down syndrome, and they're like, and they say, but you can't abort them because of that. Now you could abort them because you don't like them.
You don't like the way they look.
Or you just don't want a baby.
Yeah.
You could abort them for some other reason. I'm aborting this baby not because they have Down syndrome, but because I want an abortion.
It's Thursday.
And that could be your stated, because it's Thursday. That could be your stated reason.
All right, here's the text of the law itself from the congressional version of it. It says, it shall be unlawful to perform an abortion with the knowledge that a pregnant woman is seeking abortion in whole or in part on the basis of her child having Down syndrome. So basically, like you said,
You don't have that knowledge.
you don't have the knowledge, or the mother just has to say any other reason, or she just doesn't have to say her reason. You don't have to say her reason, right? Unless she explicitly says, abortionist, I want you to know I'm having this because the baby has Down syndrome.
Yeah. And it's not like the guy who's like killing babies for money is going to look and be like, oh, I'm sorry, this is a Down syndrome baby. I'm not killing this one.
Yeah.
We like, by the way, and then just do it. It's just asinine to the extreme. Just totally stupid. But again, we're going to repeat it. Recommend that instead of protecting all babies.
Yeah. Yeah. So. You could have this fluff, this garbage, or you could have life begins at the moment of fertilization and abortion is homicide. Justice shall be established.
Yeah. And this is we're really hardcore on this, but this is like the pro-life movement stuff. I mean, we're not saying that these people aren't pro-life. They think that these things can accumulate and bring abortion to an end. I mean, they have good motives, many of them. They want to do this stuff. They just don't think it through, or they don't have the courage.
There's like the average pro-lifer who thinks this stuff.
Yeah. Like some people, like after they hear about it, they'll be like, oh, I'm with you. But most people are like, I didn't even think about that on my own, which is shocking and a problem. But for the leaders, without going into their motives, like the leaders and the thinkers, like why they're putting this stuff forward, it's not because they think that it's going to do something. It's because they think it has some appeal, will help, fund ultrasound buses or whatever it is that they're doing instead of abolition. But all in all, these are pro-life. That's pro the life of the Down syndrome baby, but it's iniquitous and it doesn't work. But it's just not abolition.
Yep. So next bill here, we've got the bill that's trying to keep abortion pills out of pharmacies, which is called the Save Moms and Babies Act. So this bill basically, some of you may have heard, the FDA has approved for the marketing of the abortion pill, and a handful of kind of local pharmacies, and then as far as big pharmacies, CVS and Walgreens have announced that they are going to be selling the abortion pill in their pharmacies. At least, what they said was in states where it's allowed. So presumably they won't be selling it here in Oklahoma, but they would in in 80% of the states. So we'll see how that goes. But this is a bill basically to say abortion pills can't be sold in pharmacies.
Yeah.
And
one wonders if you just, when you're driving through New Mexico, you just pick some up and just bring them back to Oklahoma. And like how many abortion pills can just be picked up at Walgreens and CVS wherever and just brought back to Oklahoma? Never mind the ones that are sent. But the thing about this one is that it is new, somewhat. It is new, and it's in response to something that the FDA or the federal folks are doing. But again, it's the same thing. It's not abolishing the act of abortion, which is what they need to do. Mothers are not allowed to take these pills. Fathers are not allowed to make their mothers, wives take these pills, or girlfriends or anything like that.
Right.
Murder is murder, and it shall be prohibited. This is written, just to regulate this part of it. So,
And this is another one of those bills. We talk about bills sometimes that explicitly say, here's how you cannot murder a baby, here's how you can. This is one of those bills. I don't have a quote here from the actual bill, but I was reading this bill earlier today, and it says, here is the person who can prescribe abortion under this law. Here's the person who cannot prescribe the pills to murder a baby under this law. And so it's one of those bills that's spelling out, here's who can, here's who can't. So we have, like you said, the regulation of murder.
Yeah, and you can tell what they're doing whenever they have save moms and babies. Save moms is always first. And it's like the idea that we're just trying to protect women here, because like it may be dangerous for the Walgreens person to give you the abortion pill.
Or in Students for Life's case, we're trying to protect the environment. That's their big thing about the abortion pill. It's bad for the environment, therefore oppose it.
Yeah. Anyone who thinks that we're too hard on Students for Life, we are not hard enough on Students for Life. They are a jumbled up mess.
Yeah. Next one here, basically 3 different bills that they've got: the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act, the Abortion Insurance Full Disclosure Act, and the Protecting Life and Taxpayers Act. 3 bills that they think basically combined, put together, will prevent taxpayer dollars from supporting abortions.
Not with my money.
In any way. Right. Yeah. My pocketbook needs to be clean. I don't want to be a part of this, and if I kind of get taxpayers out of this, then I don't have to feel as bad about what's happening. And this is something I've heard even from conservatives, even from some people who are, I think, probably professing pro-lifers, not someone that pro-life groups would probably affirm as pro-lifer, but people say things like, yeah, at least don't do it with my money. Like, do it, I can't control you, but don't do it with my money. That sort of sentiment comes, I've seen it in pro-life groups.
Yeah.
And it comes from the promotion of bills like this.
Yeah, all kinds of groups, actually. Far too many people, I think, support the going after the funding stuff. It's not that there's anything bad with, like, we shouldn't fund abortion, obviously. But when you direct energy this way, it takes away from the push to abolish abortion. It's something that goes before. If you give legislators a bunch of options, or if you give them even 2 options, they're going to take the easiest one, and that's one that they do, and then later on down the road, they'll do the hard one. But they're not going to do the hard one immediately. And so whenever you give them a lineup of things that are easy, and then one thing that's really hard, they're not going to do the hard thing. Which is why, even in this list, they didn't do the heartbeat bill. They did the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. And they're not going to do the heartbeat bill until they're forced to at some point.
Yeah, they'll do.
And then they'll do something else, and then they'll do something else. But it's never going to be, I'm going to do the hardest thing first. It's always, I'm just going to do whatever easy option you put in front of me.
Yeah, and this one does need to be understood in that sort of matrix there, because there would be some abolitionist good people, or people that are kind of like, there's this group of like, I like abolitionists, but like I like to do these other things too. And sometimes they're just well-meaning, but the misdirection of energy point is much more valid than The other thing is that it's just fundamentally weak. It's just so, there's an American abortion holocaust, and you're like, well, we just need to make sure that people aren't paying for it.
Yeah.
Just like in comparison to like total abolition, which is what they should do, doing the tax thing is just very, very weak. And so some people say, well, you can do it and also abolition. Generally, we've never seen that to be the case. So it doesn't aim at the actual root, and really it won't hurt. Someone says, well, but it hurts the abortion cartel, or it's like attacking someone's supply line, like in a war analogy or something like that. You're like, no, it's not. There are celebrities that if you pass something like this, a celebrity will come in and be like, well, I'm making abortion free in California, like, just donate money. It doesn't hurt the abortion industry the way that they think that it would, because again, this isn't even a money thing. This is a sin thing. This is a we don't want children thing.
Yeah. And on the point of it being a fundamentally weak bill, I think that's kind of a theme of this whole letter. I think someone reading this letter could in no way, shape, or form come away with the idea that abortion is homicide. They could in no way, shape, or form come away with the idea that there's a Holocaust going on and that we need to be very, very urgent about stopping it.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I think their attempt at that, their attempt to create urgency or kind of a stirring in the soul of those who hate abortion. They have a line that says, the measures outlined below are the initial steps toward our ultimate goal, an America where every person is protected and welcomed in both life and law from conception. But it's like even that it's formulated in such a weak way. There's no urgency in this letter. There's nothing about justice in this letter. There's nothing there's nothing that really stirs you to think about how evil is. It's just they don't write that way.
The thing that you always see a lot in pro-life stuff that kind of like saps the urgency or just undermines it is that next, it says Congress must recognize that every abortion ends a human life and should pass the heartbeat bill. There's like this sort of thing like they're saying, so like I think a normal just person who's not all that involved in this might read this and be like, no, they're saying every, but in the same sentence, they're like, therefore, heartbeat, which isn't every. And it's like, it's astounding that you don't see this. But for those of us who do see this, you're just kind of like, that is weak. This shouldn't, no one should be able to read this and then move forward and think, yes, we're finally. And again, this is post-Rose repeal. It's not like weak because they're doing the best that they can given the parameters. It's weak following getting the right to do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
one last bill here before we get to our answer, what we think Congress should actually do. And their final prescription is the Conscience Protection Act, basically a bill to say that hospitals or other entities cannot force medical professionals to take part in abortions or else that they'll lose their job or anything like that.
Yeah.
Basically, this is being actually sponsored by James Langford here in Oklahoma. And it's
always a disappointment, that James Langford.
Yeah. And he really is one of the most pro-life people. He's one of the ones who's held up as a pro-life hero in many of the pro-life
he'll bang the
publications.
podium and say, like, I mean, he'll even like sound like he thinks it's murder.
Yeah.
And then just like the things that he's recommending are always like taxpayer things or defunding things or this. This is a lot like the tax-paying thing.
James Langford tickling the abortion dragon.
Yeah. tickle, tickle. And we're like, hey, there's an axe over there. You can take that thing's head off. But yeah, I mean, James Langford's been in there a long time. It pays to be a pro-life hero. That's how you get elected. And a lot of people, I mean, when I pull into church and I see James Langford bumper stickers, I'm just like, I know that person just doesn't understand. But that's why we make these programs. We are for educating people, not just blasting them. We want to move you along. But do we want to say anything else about Conscience Protection Act? Yeah,
this is something, there's a case about this in France not too long ago, actually. It's a thing that is happening all around the country. And it's like you can't expect to ever stop playing defense like this until you start, like I talked about earlier, until you bring our worldview into conflict with the worldview of the culture of death. You're going to always be playing defense like this and trying to just say, well, at least don't make me participate in it, or trying to protect people and allow pro-life people to still like exist in society.
Yeah.
And that's basically all this is doing. Like pro-life medical professionals should be allowed to exist as medical professionals.
Yeah. It's job protection and conscious protection and helps them sleep better at night.
Right.
But this, with any of these, just apply the golden rule to them.
Yeah.
Like if you were in a people group that was being exterminated, would you want people to be like, well, stopping your extermination, or would you want them to be like, well, I'm not going to participate in that?
And protect your own conscience.
Yeah, so people can feel better about it.
Right.
It's sort of the opposite of what they did with sort of German citizens who were just living in a Holocaust. During the Holocaust, they forced the German citizens to walk through the concentration camps to see what they were tolerating.
The Allied forces,
And this is like, don't make us walk through the concentration camps. Let us stay out of that and just pretend it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and they're acknowledging that it does. They're saying this is evil, this is bad, and I'm not going to play any role in it. And that seems good, but it's just fundamentally weak. It's not the right thing, and it could actually work to delay the whole thing. I think it numbs the conscience, and it's called the Conscience Protection Act.
Right.
Stand up and do something, pro-life doctor.
Yep.
Don't just say, I will not participate in this.
Yep.
Become an abolitionist.
So those are the prescriptions that Heritage Foundation and a number of other leading pro-life groups have submitted to Congress for Congress's passage. Let's talk about what we think Congress should actually do, which won't be a surprise to our longtime viewers. But this is something that, Russell, I'll probably tee this up to you in a second here. But we have wanted, especially since the Dobbs decision, this is a conversation, the abolition conversation needs to be taken to the national, to the federal level, and Congress needs to start moving on abolition. And so to talk a little bit about kind of your thought process on why that is.
So this is, people are going to see this, you're going to see, like, we're not going to just reveal everything now, but you're going to see that basically we're going to stop banging the drum, free the states, or banging the assert state sovereignty to abolish abortion. Abolitionists now have to have a very purposeful dual strategy. We can't abandon seeking to criminalize abortion in the states. You can't abandon trying to protect children within your borders, but you can't at the same time just do that and not demand that Congress abolish it in every state, because we do not want to play into a system where you have abortion states and non-abortion states, because when you have non-abortion states and $49 flights and celebrities that love abortion that will pay you to put you on them, you're not doing anything about abortion. We really need to do what we can to demand total, immediate criminalization, abolition of abortion from the federal Congress. This is what they always should have done. Now, someone said, well, then why weren't you spending a lot of time demanding that previously? Well, we were. The way we were pushing for that was by pushing a state to do it. So if you can get a state to stand up to the judicial tyranny that is Roe, assert sovereignty, abolish abortion, you can have a cascade of states that leads to the federal conversation. So now the thing that leads to the federal conversation is not just that, because that can be interpreted as working, depending on how you think it. If you just focus on a state abolition ban of abortion, it can be interpreted as, okay, well, states have their different rights to do different things, and so we're going to allow that. You're working within this new paradigm. We need to be basically saying, no, as a person in Oklahoma who's a citizen of the United States of America, I'm demanding that my congressman at Washington, D.C. put forward a bill to abolish abortion, because they shouldn't be able to kill my littlest neighbors in California, Maryland, New York, whatever. So we have to kind of rally all abolitionists together to a unified call, basically something like this, but not these 6 recommendations, just the one recommendation, total and immediate abolition, and get Congress moving on that. There actually are already some inroads, that we could probably, hopefully, talk about in the future or something like that. But the point right now, I think the focus right now of abolitionists is to make sure that you are recommending federal. Don't because we're called Free the States. Don't think that all we ever wanted is to go from state to state to state to state. We were wanting to free the states to do what they ought to do. But now it's kind of abolitionists need to rise up across the culture, demand total abolition everywhere. And we're not going to do that by just doing the state stuff. So our recommendation to Congress, and it's kind of, there's probably different strategies, whether or not Congress needs to start an amendment process to make it clear, or, pass laws to say, hey, no, the Constitution's clear. No state is allowed to have abortions. So there'd be different things to probably talk about and think about. But right now, among those things is to shoot down these 6 things. And every time and any time that energy is being misdirected towards any of these things, you need to say, no, you need to do your job. And your job is to bear the sword against the evildoers. And as the federal legislature, that is your one thing is to rein in any state that wants to practice, and this is going to scare some people. Like some people are like, man, that guy sounds like Abraham Lincoln. But the federal government should not allow any state to practice abortion as a peculiar institution within their borders. And if the federal government starts to look like they're leaning that way, we may see some states threatening secession to practice abortion. So that's where I think a lot of things are heading in the future. And like the abolitionist of slavery, chattel slavery, you don't just sort of like sit in Boston and say, well, we just need to make sure that we're, keeping slavery illegal here. No, you're in Boston and you're talking about what they should and shouldn't do in Georgia. So
Right.
we need to make sure that we're doing that. And a lot of people are like, well, I would naturally do that, but it's not naturally the case that everyone's going to do that. So we're going to try to provide some arguments and leadership in that.
Right. So let's talk about, on that note, two objections that I'm sure if there's anyone from any of these pro-life groups who's watching this, or people who are kind of in the pro-life mindset, which is probably the majority of the pro-life movement, which is certainly the majority of the pro-life movement, you might be thinking, well, if you put forward a bill to abolish abortion in Congress, well, it probably won't pass. You probably don't have the votes.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is almost certainly true. The idea that there is a majority of Congress who desires the total abolition of abortion immediately, that's just not the reality that we currently have. Now,
You're never going to get it, though.
you're never going to get it
Without
until you
qualifying.
ask for it, and
Yeah.
until you, like the Republicans have done to Democrats with a bill like the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. That bill has no real-world value except for exposing the Democrats who vote against it. That's the only value that bill has. Similarly, to put forward an abolition bill, even if it doesn't pass, there is tremendous value toward the abolition of abortion in exposing that there are lots of Republicans who don't really want the abolition of abortion.
Yeah.
And then to get movements going in those congressional districts, to get those guys unseated,
Yeah.
and to replace them with people who will support the abolition of abortion.
Yeah, they're every bit as necessary to replace them as the Democrats, especially when you're talking about like a House that's dominated by the majority of Republicans.
Right.
So it's like, wait, majority of Republican pro-lifers, and we can't abolish abortion, or we can't get that passed through the House. What's wrong? Oh, you got to replace these people. But people don't know that you need to replace them unless you do something that exposes the issue.
Right. You have to get their vote on the record. And this brings up another really important point, something that you've been stressing a lot since the Dobbs decision, and it just left my mind.
And I guess I was stressing it a whole lot. Maybe it'll come back to you. I mean, you have a note here in the outline saying, stir up Democrats and cause a backlash. There was something to say there.
Hopefully it'll come back to me, but otherwise we probably...
While you're thinking about that,
Yeah.
while you were snapping, like I was just thinking, man, Donald Trump's whole tweet that he put out there, he's like blaming like some people extreme pro-lifers. No, he's blaming like people who have an abolitionist mindset. It's like you people that want to abolish abortion are ruining it for us.
And what's interesting about it is he didn't even name abolitionists. He named the pro-lifers who were just like too pro-life. He's like, you pro-lifers who don't support the rape exception, you're the reason that the red wave didn't hit America.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Which I don't even think is true, but like
No.
that he's signaling that. Like he's showing like, hey, the Republican Party really isn't like the party that wants to get rid of this thing.
And he's working to make it less the party that wants to get rid of this thing. He's working to pull it in a more pro-abortion direction.
Yeah, and there's plenty. I mean, there are plenty of conservative pro-life Republicans that would be fine with ditching the pro-life thing because they are actually more concerned about Marxism or something.
That's right. It came back to me. The point that you've been stressing a lot lately is the need to create a new dichotomy. And this is an old point that you've had, but you've stressed it more recently. Not so much between pro-life, pro-choice, abolitionist, but just abolitionist, anti-abolitionist.
Yeah.
You're either on this side or you're on this side. And I think the reason why that really is true is if you look at pro-life states like Oklahoma right now, it says pro-life as it gets. Abortion, as far as the pro-lifers desire abortion to be abolished, it's been abolished. There's no abortion clinics. It's illegal for providers to do it. There's a possible 10-year prison sentence if you perform an abortion, but the mothers are immune. And that's all the pro-lifers want to do. They want to leave it right there and keep that the status quo on abortion. And what do you have? You have a bunch of mothers who are going online and ordering pills to their door. And so the reality of a completely pro-life Oklahoma is an abortion-filled Oklahoma.
Yeah, and it's actually been shown. Studies are coming out saying, who's ordering most abortion pills, like who's leading the nation? Well, Oklahoma's in the top 5.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very clear that on the issue, it's criminalization. You say, here's criminalizing abortion. Abolitionists, yes. Pro-lifers, no. Pro-choicers, no. It should not be a criminal act to take a pill to murder your child. Right. Pro-lifers, pro-choicers, 100% identical view on criminalization. So it's like kind of hard to know what to call this. It's like abolitionist is a good word. Now, some people, because they got branding, they branded something over here, they don't like it. But abolitionist is very clear. We want to abolish it, take away the legal protections, clear word. These people over here, it's like I'm tempted to call them like abortionist. But I think the pro-lifers, they're still not for abortion. They're just not for justice. So it's kind of like pro-justice, anti-justice people. And also on this side, pro-life. And did you see that post that I put up? I'm not going to read it because it's in one of these books that kind of fall on us around here. But did you see that? It's like page 1 in a book called Gregarious Saints, where it's like the author's like, I'm going to talk about this period of time, and there are anti-slavery people and there are abolitionists. And he says the anti-slavery people wanted to end slavery. They wanted to end it in various ways, accumulative. They'd pray for it and all this kind of stuff. But then there were the abolitionists, and they were like explicit, abolish it, it's a crime, get rid of it, punish people for it. So it's kind of like, this would be very radical, but it's like pro-lifers do want to end abortion. They just don't want to end it if criminalization is required. A lot of pro-choicers would probably be okay with ending abortion. But there are some that actually like it. But there are people who are like, well, nobody wants to have an abortion. You run into them on the street. Nobody wants to have an abortion, but we have to have it. So there's just people who think this act should not be criminalized, and there are people who think this act should. So moving into the new year and a lot of this stuff, that we've always stressed abolitionists versus pro-lifers and pro-choicers. But I think it's going to be abolitionists versus everybody else. Right.
And there will be a lot of Republican congressmen who fall into the anti-abolitionist category who do not think abortion should be criminalized. And that needs to be exposed. And so bringing forward a bill in Congress will be a great tool toward that end.
What's more anti-abolitionist than putting forward a bill of abolition and someone being against it? So abolitionist, anti-abolitionist.
Yep.
There's a lot of anti-abolitionists for all sorts of reasons. Okay.
So that was the first objection. We don't have the votes. The second objection, and I hear this one a good deal as well, it'll make Democrats so mad that they'll get more organized and they'll have a lot of energy and they'll get Democrats elected in the next election cycle. And it's this sort of...
Don't want to jeopardize our number of elephants.
Yeah. This is the thinking that leads to zero cultural gains over 50. This is the sort of thing that doesn't change anything because all you're concerned about is the next election cycle. I can't do anything. My hands are tied because my opponents will be angry at what I do in the next election cycle. But if that keeps you from speaking the truth, if that keeps you from bringing the Christian worldview into conflict with the worldview of death for the sake of one election cycle, you're never going to actually move the ball down the field culturally or politically. You will just benefit the GOP in one election cycle.
Yep.
Democrats are willing to pay the price on this, especially under the Obama administration. They put forward numerous policy objectives that were incredibly unpopular in the American public, and they didn't care if they were unpopular.
They changed the culture.
They changed the culture, and they were okay getting walloped in every midterm election during Obama. Obama got reelected, but the whole Democratic Party during his time in office got walloped every single midterm in state legislatures, in Congress, but they didn't care. Democrats were not concerned about the next election cycle. They're concerned about the society, the culture, the way people think, creating new social norms, creating a new Overton window. That's what they're concerned about. And so we can't be concerned about one election cycle and lose the whole game. We're so concerned with one battle that we lose the whole war.
Yep. And that's why we don't see the movement that we should see and would see we're not saying be like Democrats. But in this regard, you know, you're not worth the seat you're sitting in if you can't do what you said you were going to do when you got in it because you're worried about staying in it another 4 years.
Definitely be that brazen, and Christians have a reason to be that brazen. You know, God is sovereign. There's no fear that you know, God is going to destroy you for doing, you know, the righteous thing, but for the unrighteous, they have every reason to be afraid, and they're just completely brazen about it. So if you're not as brazen as that for righteousness and for Christ, then there's an issue there, a major issue there.
It's like a practical atheism when the legislator's like, well, I can't do this thing that God would have me do because I need to get reelected. It's like, because God can't reelect you. You don't believe that there's a God. Or you say you do, but you don't in your actions. Right. So great stuff. I think we're going to try this year to keep the Liberator podcast within an hour or something. I don't know where we're at right now.
We're good.
We're good. We're still within an hour. So we're going to wrap up.
In.
I want to say one thing about before we move into the standard stuff that we move in. We will continue to ask people to support us. You know, we're going to try to expand our influence, expand our education stuff, expand our just ability to help people and just be a part of, you know, helping. We don't think of ourselves as the abolitionist movement. You know, we're part of the abolitionist movement. We want to play a role in it, and there is a clear movement that's out there, and we want to do the best that we can to help people in that movement. So we're going to be expanding a lot of our gear, a lot of our activities, events, materials. We want to bring on another guy to help with some videos, and we want to bring in more people to help with all that. So we love you and thank you, those that do support us. At the same time, here's a situation. We're getting less support. It's getting more expensive to buy bread, so we get less support. And we know that. But, you know, by God's grace, you know, we're still going to continue to do what we do and, you know, pray that people support us, and we're not going to annoy you incessantly asking you to support us, except for at the end of every show. But we're not gonna email you 10 times a week saying, give us money or we'll die. We're not going to die. God wants us doing this, and so we're going to keep doing it to the best of our ability. So we're going to continue this year to thank our regular donors, people who give to us monthly. I think it's give to us monthly 25 or up, but it may just be like anyone who gives to us monthly. I don't think we police it very much. But we're going to continue to do the drawing for a drawing, and we're going to continue to give discounts for all of our gear. And there's more gear than there's ever been before. Oh, hey, new hats.
New hats. You can see this. Look. New hat, new shirts, new sweaters.
Product placement isn't actually a silly or sinful thing when it's like your product on your show.
Yeah. And if it's going to get a lot of people in trouble at airports and stuff like that.
Yes.
You know, it's
a
good thing.
Yeah. Dusty, we went to this airport in like Ohio, and I went and I was wearing that shirt, and I was at the gate, like it was like kind of tucked away. So until my plane, I like just like stood out like in the middle of the big causeway type thing.
Yeah.
And just stood there just like staring at people. And I was like, I'm going to get into a really good conversation, and we're not going to be able to TikTok it. So, and I got into one really good one, but you'll never see it on TikTok. So, so we're going to do the drawing for the drawing. Do visit. It is currently called store.freethestates.org. It probably will switch to just general abolitionist rising gear. There are a lot of people demanding old abolitionist gear that's no longer available. Bring some of that back, bring in some new stuff. And we're going to produce Abolitionist Rising, which will be a website that doesn't just point to us, but points to all abolitionist groups everywhere, because we really feel that in a state, the abolitionist group in that state needs to get as much help as they can. And so we're going to build a map and point people to those states. That way the legislators, when they're dealing with something in their state, they want to know people who live there, and they want to have contacts with them. So we're just going to try to facilitate all that. So we got a lot of work to do and a lot of things to build. So we continue to spend your money well.
Yeah. Kelly Green says, "Who's the hippie?" I think he's talking about me.
Yeah, this is it's the mustache.
Yeah, probably.
It's the dirty stash.
Yeah, I don't think hippie. I think Western or something like that.
It's a hipster thing to kind of meld Western with like a flat bill hat.
No.
My son, I walked in the other day with this, and he's like, "I want that." and then he put it on, and he immediately started. And I was like, "No, you're not supposed to do that."
Yeah.
So
You want to grab the art real
Yep.
quick, and then
Yep.
we can head out here. This is the artwork that we will be giving away last episode of January.
which is there a way to like get this? This is I've already got this drop card designed, and James has sent me some writing for the back of it. We just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet.
Nice.
Financially, the drop card looks way better than that. That's just the ink work that goes into it before it goes into Photoshop and gets protected and all that. So you'll notice that says abolitionistrising.com, created in the image of God. It has some theological symbols and
Yep.
stuff that I do, scrolly stuff.
And for those who are just listening on an audio app, head over to the YouTube or the Facebook if you would like to see what the drop card looks like. Because I know we have a lot of app listeners.
Yeah,
So.
and we'll post that soon. And so please, if you can, give to us, and we hope to give something back to you.
Yep.
And
At freethestates.org/donate.
we're also trying to build out this YouTube channel. So please subscribe. Is there a way that we can see who subscribes?
No.
Yes, but not everybody.
Oh, man. I was about to say, whoever subscribes right now is going to get this mug sent to them for free. But
I don't know.
apparently
Yeah.
we don't know how to do that.
Because it depends what their account settings are. If their account's set to private, then we can't see their name. or
Okay.
anything.
No, can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. hey, so, can you see the comments live?
Yes.
Oh, man, it's going to be Kelly. Dang it.
He needs a cowboy hat. Is what he
Next
says.
person, next person to make a comment on our YouTube gets this, but I'm not paying the shipping.
All the Facebook people are going to be rushing over there.
Facebook people on the YouTube, if you make a comment and share, you have to, I don't know if you're going to share it, but you have to make a comment and you have to share the YouTube thing, and you have to subscribe. If you're not subscribed, it doesn't count. But if you do all that and you want to come to my house and come to the office and get this mug, it's yours.
Or I guess you could send it to someone in Alaska paying for a plane ticket coming all this way.
Well, if someone from Alaska, they gotta order like something else. Put it in there with them. We are poor, folks. You got to understand.
Mason Goodnight, I believe.
Nathan
won. Mason
Goodnight.
If he did all the other things, then he won.
Mason, if you come to a conference or if you order anything, I'm going to put a little sticker on it. This mug is yours. Every age has its evils. Every age has its abolitionists. Mason Goodnight is certainly one of those. Mm-hmm. So this mug belongs to you, free. Next time you make a purchase of anything else, I will put it in.
Go on and get a
Go buy a sticker.
sticker for $3.
And I'll send it to you like this.
And now we are actually ending the perpetual ending here.
Yes, that was too long.
Yeah. So, anyways, this has been another episode of the Liberator Podcast, where we're committed to being as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. We'll see you next week.